The situation in the Middle East has become deadlocked, and the risk of passing through the Strait of Hormuz has escalated. As goods can't be safely exported, China's export chain has suffered a devastating blow. According to vessel tracking websites, 2 container ships flying the Hong Kong flag, the COSCO Indian Ocean and the COSCO Arctic Ocean, tried to pass through the Strait of Hormuz in the early morning of March 27th. However, they suddenly turned around near the entrance to the strait, close to Larak Island. On March 27th, a Chinese shipping industry insider reported that 2 COSCO shipping vessels in the Persian Gulf attempted to negotiate passage with Iran at a toll station, but were refused and had to return to their original positions and anchor. According to Malaysian media, Nanyang, on March 28th, these 2 container ships entered the Persian Gulf in late February, under the subsidiary COSCO Shipping Development under COSCO Shipping. Each ship carried about 19,000 TEUs, and when they were built 10 years ago, they were among the largest container ships in the world. Additionally, since the outbreak of the Iran war, at least 66 COSCO-owned oil tankers have been stranded in the Persian Gulf. On March 25th, COSCO Shipping issued a customer notice announcing that bookings for container ships traveling from Asia to Gulf countries would resume. Everything seemed normal, business as usual. However, just 2 days later, reality struck. According to previous statements from Iran, China is considered a friendly country, and ships should be allowed to pass. Iran's foreign minister publicly stated that Iran had allowed friendly countries, including China, Russia, and India, to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. But on March 27th, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard issued a statement saying that the strait was closed and ships to and from enemy-allied ports were banned. Chinese state media reported that Chinese ships were allowed to pass. On social media, some patriotic users claimed that as long as the ship flies the Chinese flag, it would be safe from attacks and pass through the strait without issue. Interestingly, COSCO Group has also come out to refute the claims. The so-called successful passage was false, and the ship was still in the Persian Gulf. This essentially confirmed that ships had not passed. The COSCO shipping vessels probably thought that since they were Chinese ships flying the Chinese flag, Iran would show some respect. However, the way was blocked. On one hand, Chinese crew members remain anxious in the Persian Gulf, while on the other hand, the Chinese authorities manipulate public opinion on social media, creating the illusion that Chinese ships can pass without issue. This incident has sparked ridicule from many netizens. They ask, did the ship forget to bring its national flag? And has Iran really become that ruthless? Some netizens mock that the knockoff version of radars and weapons China sold to Iran has caused disaster, and it's lucky that Iran hasn't asked for a refund. They joke, you can't get through the Strait of Hormuz, but you can get through on Douyin. The Chinese Communist Party's lies have been exposed. They had been telling the public that only Chinese ships could pass through, so why are they changing their story now? One netizen commented, so much for the so-called China-Iran friendship and strategic partnership, they mean nothing when it comes to real military control. Since the end of February, after the US and Israel launched military actions against Iran, Iran has turned the Strait of Hormuz into a retaliatory battleground. Iran attacked a Thai container ship passing through the Strait of Hormuz. It was engulfed in flames. Almost simultaneously, Iran destroyed a Maltese-flagged vessel for trying to cross the strait. Currently, most tanker operations are too afraid to risk passing through the strait. According to data from the S&P Global Market Intelligence, nearly 500 tankers were stationed west of the Persian Gulf Strait, most of them staying put. On March 27th, a netizen called Captain Bro posted a video saying,
At 8 p.m. local time, 4 hours ahead of Beijing time, I guess many of you want to push this position to Navy full speed ahead. But we can't. We're still waiting. Hope you all have patience. I want to push this forward too, but there's nothing we can do. If we don't get any orders, we can only wait. Here, let me show you the sea outside. The lights are still on. You can see the waves are big today, and they're still fishing.
On March 19th, a video was posted on Douyin showing a Chinese ship stranded in the Persian Gulf. The video showed a warning issued by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. No ships, regardless of nationality or name, are allowed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. If you disobey, you'll be held responsible for our country's hatred. The account that posted the video was registered in Qatar, leading to speculation that it might be a Chinese crew member stuck in the Persian Gulf. The crew member also posted a report revealing that the Strait of Hormuz is still blocked. He said that the 3 videos he had recently posted were all blocked from review. He provided an update, explaining that his ship was anchored 25 nautical miles northwest of Dubai, surrounded by other anchored ships, approximately 200 of them, half of which were oil tankers and the other half liquefied natural gas carriers. He said that almost all the ships were stationary, and there was no hope of the Strait of Hormuz reopening anytime soon. On March 11th, an audio recording surfaced online, revealing a Chinese cargo ship near the Strait of Hormuz attempting to take a dangerous risk after running out of supplies. In the conversation, the crew anxiously asked their colleagues on other ships whether it would be safer to cross during the day or at night, as the situation was critical. The crew mentioned that their food was almost gone, and they had to choose between starving or attempting to cross. On March 12th at 5:40 a.m., a Chinese container ship near the Strait of Hormuz was hit and caught fire. The same Douyin account posted a remote conversation recording of the ship under attack. According to the crew of the damaged ship, they were attacked by an Iranian drone. They initially considered abandoning ship, but the Coast Guard only sent a small boat that could carry fewer than 10 people. After a brief inspection, the boat left. The crew mentioned that the Chinese company was in contact with rescue vessels to help them. The ship was hit in the engine room by an Iranian drone, and fortunately there were no casualties. However, the ship's damage was around 3 to 5 meters above the waterline, and the main electrical cables were destroyed. They could only use emergency generators, and both the main and auxiliary engines were inoperable. They couldn't raise the anchor, and there were no spare parts available, so they were waiting for supplies to arrive. Other crew members suggested that if things went wrong, they should abandon ship immediately and not wait for rescue. One remark exposed the true attitude of Chinese crew members towards the Chinese government's wolf warrior diplomacy. On March 12th, according to the UK Maritime Trade Operations, the container ship called Source Blessing was attacked and caught fire near Jebel Ali port in the UAE. Fortunately, there were no crew casualties. The Source Blessing, which has a capacity of 3,240 TEU, flies the Liberian flag. It was leased by Hapag-Lloyd and later subleased to Maersk. Notably, according to the ship's AIS data, the vessel was marked with an all-Chinese crew. Before being hit, the ship broadcasted China owner information through AIS, trying to indicate a Chinese connection to avoid Iranian attacks, but still, it wasn't spared. According to the ship's registration details, it was owned by a Chinese-controlled company, registered in Hong Kong, called Well Wonder One Limited. Hapag-Lloyd later confirmed the incident, stating that missile debris was found. Iran's threats to vessels in the Persian Gulf have significantly increased the risks of passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Recently, an editor from the UK think tank, Royal United Services Institute, said, "On the open seas, ships can always change course, but in choke points or narrow straits, this option is almost non-existent. This means that Iran doesn't necessarily need to actively seek out targets, it only needs to wait." This effectively creates a kill zone, where attack warning times could be as short as a few seconds. Since the outbreak of the war, Iran's ability to damage commercial vessels has been weakened. However, reducing the risk to zero is almost impossible. So, for the foreseeable future, ships will still face continuous threats from these systems, whether in part or in full. The U.S. has successfully weakened parts of Iran's traditional naval forces, but the greatest threat still comes from Iran's unconventional weapons, such as drones, fast attack boats, and unmanned vessels filled with explosives. Before the war, the Strait of Hormuz carried 1/5 of global oil shipments and nearly 1/3 of fertilizer trade. If fertilizer trade remains blocked for an extended period, it will threaten global agriculture and food security. Now, this artery is essentially half paralyzed. Even more concerning, Iran's parliament is playing dirty behind the scenes, considering collecting tolls. There are talks of introducing legislation requiring all ships passing through the strait to pay a fee for ensuring navigational safety. Reports suggest the toll could be as high as $2 million, and payments could be made in RMB or cryptocurrencies. The surrounding countries, already furious about the blockade, were further enraged when the news about the toll emerged. With ships unable to pass, freight costs have immediately surged. Shipping fees for routes from Asia to the Middle East have risen by 15 to 20%. Even more alarming is the war risk insurance, which used to be about 0.25% of the cargo value, but has now skyrocketed to 7.5%. Ports are also starting to experience congestion. Malaysia's Port Klang has seen a 50% increase in congestion. Singapore's port congestion rose by 36%, and Colombo Port in Sri Lanka saw a 46% increase. These numbers reflect the global supply chain beginning to jam. As the world's largest importer of crude oil, China relies on the Middle East for nearly half of its oil supply, most of which must pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Oil prices have repeatedly exceeded $100 and even $110 per barrel. High oil prices not only increase domestic refining and transportation costs, but also ripple through the supply chain, affecting manufacturing, logistics, and the cost of living. Chinese export companies are especially feeling the pain. The Strait of Hormuz is a critical trade route connecting Asia with Europe and the Middle East. A large number of China's container goods, industrial products, and raw materials rely on this route for export. The disruption to exports will further amplify the downward pressure on the domestic economy, leading to inventory backlogs and strained cash flows for companies. Small and medium-sized enterprises are especially vulnerable. Many factories that rely on Middle Eastern orders face the risk of shutdowns. At the same time, high oil prices are pushing up domestic energy costs, affecting the competitiveness of manufacturing. According to Chinese reports, many foreign trade companies in Shenzhen and other areas have seen their goods stuck at ports and unable to be shipped to Middle Eastern markets. Container shipments to Gulf countries have virtually halted, with a significant increase in the risk of order delays or cancellations. Global fertilizer supplies are also affected. Urea prices have increased by 30% in just 1 week. Aluminum and chemical raw materials needed for car manufacturing are facing shortages. China's high dependence on imported fertilizers means that any disruption to the spring planting or rainy season fertilization window could lead to decreased crop yields, which would translate into rising food prices and supply shortages. In short, Iran has not only closed off a strait, it has blocked a major door to global trade. The U.S. and Israel's military actions against Iran have now entered their second month, with the situation deadlocked. Beijing had hoped that its special relationship with Iran would allow it to play a key mediation role in the U.S.-Iran standoff. This diplomatic strategy, aimed to gain support from the global south, has quickly faced cold reality in just a few weeks. According to exclusive reports from the Epoch Times, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's repeated mediation efforts were part of Beijing's carefully crafted strategy. After the conflict broke out, China's diplomatic system swiftly launched multiple initiatives, calling for dialogue on the United Nations platform, while privately pressuring Iran through bilateral channels. China hoped that by leveraging its relationship, it could secure passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Beijing had a clear plan. If it could successfully mediate in the U.S.-Iran conflict, it would not only alleviate domestic pressures, but also present itself as a mediator to the global south. This would attract support from developing countries and help expand its influence in platforms like the BRICS and Shanghai Cooperation Organization. However, Iran's response was far from what Beijing expected. Iran only assured the safety of some goods being transported to Iran, repeatedly emphasizing the limited scope of this guarantee. This response, which clearly carried a threatening tone, essentially placed Beijing in a dilemma between providing military aid and ensuring trade security. President Trump plans to visit China from May 14th through 15th. He is to meet with Xi Jinping, a development that has quickly become the focus of international opinion. China has expressed clear expectations for the visit, but has been more cautious regarding military aid to Iran. Beijing's reasoning is straightforward. Any blatant military aid captured by U.S. intelligence would weaken its negotiating leverage. As a result, Beijing is reluctant to engage in any open friction with the U.S. over the Iran issue just before the summit. Regarding whether Beijing might adjust its policy stance because of this, several observers believe the possibility is low. Political commentator Li Lingyi stated, For the Chinese Communist Party, the likelihood of changing its attitude toward military aid to Iran is extremely low. For the CCP, it's already providing some indirect military aid to Iran in secret. Now, for China to make a large-scale diplomatic policy shift and openly provide military assistance to Iran, that would only happen in extreme circumstances. The military is absolutely not going to do this. Former Beijing lawyer and president of the Canadian Alliance for Democracy, Lai Jianping, said, "After all, the interests of U.S.-China relations far outweigh those between China and Iran."